Good evening, and thank you for joining me at Music Today. This is Keitaro Harada. The concept of the show is to bring in an artist each episode and have a conversation with the artist about a performance we will all watch and listen together. The live component is very important because I encourage the viewers to comment and ask questions to the artist. Music Today is a bilingual show. The live streams during your evening will be in English, and the shows that broadcast during the morning time will be in Japanese for the fans in Japan. If you want to improve on your Japanese skills, you're more than welcome to watch the Japanese interviews too. Without further ado, I'd like to bring in our guest for tonight. Since I cannot hear you applaud, please do me a huge favor and comment by using clapping emojis, or you can use clap, 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 and just let's get this party started. Please welcome our special guest, pianist, radio host, Christopher O'Reilly.
Keitaro, Maestro, so great to be with you.
Oh, you can just call me K. Maestro.
All right.
Schmaltzy, like, I feel like I have to be in my tuxes and have my white hair pull out, my wig on or something. How are you, Chris?
Very well. Very good to be with you.
Thank you. Well, thanks for being on the show. So for our viewers, I'd like to just share a little bit about my encounter with Christopher O'Reilly, which was in 2003. I was a student at Interlochen Arts Academy. I was a senior that year, and I had applied for the show from the top. 2003 would have been how many years into the show?
Probably about 3 years in, yes.
Right, because it started around 2000, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So very early on, and I had auditioned on my saxophone, and then was, luckily, very luckily accepted to be part of the show, which aired at Interlochen. This show and the team and yourself came to Interlochen, and the year before that.
You're still in the archives, Kay.
I am.
I mean, all of our shows are accessible
yes.
from the top.org. So yeah, we can hear that performance.
Definitely. I remember the show coming to Interlochen the year prior, and being an audience, and that was my first year at Interlochen, thinking, oh, I really want to get on that show. That I have to have a good story. I have to have a good performance, and the story part was just like I just had to just be myself, and then tell you who I am and what I was, and it was funny enough that it got picked up on that end, and then the performance followed. But that was sort of my first break into the U.S. musical scene. I had grown up in Tokyo, and then you really opened the doors for me. And then putting that name from the top, and the performance with you, the archival performance with you, and the recording had really pushed my career forward. Yes. My early stages of my career. So couldn't thank you enough. And then. And then Chris and it's interesting because when the show became 10 years, when the 10-year anniversary, you invited alumni to the show. I think you invited 10 alumni.
Well, we can go ahead and say all stars. How's that?
Well, yes, definitely, for sure. And I was one of them because from the really funny story and incident of how my life came about, which was NPR knew me as a saxophonist, and then now I'm about to go conduct Tanglewood and the Boston Symphony that summer.
Right.
It's like what a 180.
Quite a trajectory. Quite a
Yeah.
springboard. My gosh, yes.
Yeah, and here's a quick photo from that time. This is the 10th year anniversary concert, so like 2010. We are playing Astor Piazzolla, and we're going to talk about Piazzolla later. But
Yeah, great.
Just great memories of this particular performance.
Me too.
Yikes! Well, anyway, so we have before we get started with the music, I have some hellos that I would like to share from Esther. Christina's mom.
Yes,
hello from Cincinnati.
Yeah.
We have Dave Lake, a radio host in Savannah, Georgia. So thank you, Dave. We have Phyllis Albertson from Savannah. Thank you. We have a neighbor of yours, Victoria Fatu.
Oh, hi.
From Los Angeles. Victoria is
you down the hill.
I know, right? Victoria is a wonderful pianist. She and I have collaborated, worked together with the West Virginia Symphony a couple seasons ago. And we have Maestro Roger Collier also.
Yes, of course. Hi, Roger. Yes.
Yes, he just got a music director position in the Midwest in Indiana, I believe. But he's been living with. He was the staff conductor at Pacific Symphony, so he's been living in California for quite some time.
Yes.
So, Chris, let's talk about music. Radiohead. Tell me about this music.
Well, I became enamored of their music when their third album came out. It was called OK Computer, and I don't think there was a more widely praised rock record since the Beatles' White Album or Abbey Road. I knew nothing about the record, and I got it just based on what I was reading, and I just fell in love with Radiohead and their music. And there are very specific ways in which I fall in love with music. It doesn't matter what genre it is, but I'm always a real sucker for a very sensual harmonic environment. And so if there's a chord change, jazz players are great at this too, even if it's a normal chord, but if they voice it in an interesting way, it has a certain color, sort of synesthetic touch to it. And then of course, the other main thing about all music that I love is counterpoint. And there's a lot of pop music that is really quite vertical, and Radiohead, I think maybe only their guitarist, Johnny Greenwood, reads music, actually. I mean, they're all just instinctive musicians and self-trained, but they each contribute a thread to the song, to every one of their important songs. It's a real five-way conversation. And that I found just extraordinarily engaging. So actually, I got into making these arrangements around the same time we were starting up From the Top, because originally that platform was intended to be for all kinds of music, and not just classical, but jazz and bluegrass and what have you, gospel, blues. And we started shopping it around to the various stations, pilot season, and they said, you play 1 minute of jazz, mister, and you are off. So we had to toe the line, but at the same time, we would always get away with things occasionally, like the 9-year-old guitarist whose dad taught her how to play Jimi Hendrix's, Purple Haze behind her neck, or things like that would happen. We would have a jazz pianist on and just call him a composer. So they got away with that. So on every show, there was a 2 or 3 minute pass at the halfway point, which some stations would break away and take care of local business. Others would play what we sent them. And we didn't want our young guests to be at the whim of whether they were going to be heard or not. So that became the place where I would play a solo piece. And I would started running out of Chopin preludes and two-part inventions and things like that. And I thought to incorporate these arrangements that I had started doing because I was fascinated with Radiohead's music. And so I played them, and our announcer, Joanne Robinson, would get on and say, that was our host, Christopher O'Reilly, playing Karma Police by Radiohead. And we started getting email into the program saying, who is this Mr. Head, and where can I find more of his beautiful music? And because they imagined that they knew me as a classical pianist. They figured what I was playing was classical. And
Right.
so they made that leap of just enjoying what they were hearing and asking where they could find more. And so as a result of that, and a couple of other appearances on Performance Today, etc., my performances of Radiohead started getting around. About 150 Radiohead-related websites around the world. And that's when Sony got interested and said, well, is this material that you want to tour? And I said, yeah. And so that's how True Love Waits started. And True Love Waits, my first record, that's how it all came about.
Fantastic. I want to just take like 10, 20 seconds of just listening to the original of this song.
When I'm driving, take me on board their beautiful ship. Show me the words I love to see.
There's such a groove to them, right? There's the harmony that is very Radiohead. You always know it's them. Which is fantastic. Yeah.
Interesting thing about this particular song that I didn't realize until I started getting into other musics. Tom York, the lead singer of Radiohead, did an interview in which they were doing like, teen beat kind of questions, 20, turn-ons, turns-offs, and who's your biggest musical hero? And Tom York said, Nick Drake. And so that's how I got into Nick Drake. And so there's a song by Nick Drake called Parasite, which is harmonically identical except for the intro and outro to Subterranean Homesick Alien. So
that's really cool.
I'm not going to say anything, but anyway, absolutely identical.
Awesome. Let's listen to your performance of.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I like that.
It is, what a beautiful, beautiful song. It really is. And the harmony is just so welcoming, and it really it doesn't make you super nervous. You can kind of like let it just like I could allow the harmonies to just absorb.
Just wash.
Really nice.
Yeah.
Yes. Fantastic. A few comments from our viewers. Which first one is, what are the challenges of making rock approach the complexity of Rachmaninoff?
Well, well said. I think that the main thing is my contention that what I'm very much turned on by is this idea of the 5 voices of the players of Radiohead. And so sometimes it's actually just getting them all down in notation is enough to make its own texture. Subterranean Homesick Alien is a great example. Let Down is another of my favorite songs. And there's a kind of a mandala sort of repeated thing in the guitar that then dictates the harmonic texture. And so it's just a matter of choosing what doesn't belong in the piece. I mean, I also then do a fair amount of reharmonization of things so that I can incorporate some of the overtones that one could only hear with steel strings on an acoustic guitar or cymbals or bass drum. So to have that kind of atonal sort of a cluster version of harmony, but making sure that we can know the bare bones of the harmony that we're doing. But yeah, there's a lot of ambient texturalizations that I do at the piano. And with for instance, with Nick Drake's music, we were talking earlier, he was just a wonderful guitarist, and most players spend so much of their time transcribing his music, just trying to figure out how he had tuned his guitar for that particular piece. And I can just look at the pattern and put it down in piano notation, and off we go. I feel like I'm in the gloves of Nick Drake at that point.
That's fantastic. New York City Timescape comments saying hello to you.
Oh yes, well, the Joe's Pub concert was really like one of my favorites. I think I did a couple of nights there, and that was really when True Love Waits had been released, and yet I was also doing already some new pieces in that set. It was just wonderful. I'm so glad you were there. I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
And Dave also has mentioned that enjoys the albums of Shuffle Play and Listen and Troika.
Oh, yes, of course.
So Chris, tell us a little bit about at what point in your life did you know that you wanted to pursue a career in music and become a pianist?
It was pretty early on.
Okay.
It was basically an ultimatum by the nuns at St. Athanasius Elementary School. When I got into kindergarten, my mother had precociously taught me how to read before I entered kindergarten, and so the nuns were very upset, and they said, "Oh well, he knows how to read. He's going to get bored, and he's going to get into trouble. We don't want any troublemakers." So it was an ultimatum. I could have French lessons for $15 a week or piano lessons for $15. And my mother, of course, thought, oh, well, piano lessons, of course, because he's obviously got perfect pitch. No, it was just that I could read the record jacket, Tchaikovsky Concerto B flat minor, that was it wasn't that I had perfect pitch. Having stood next to my father in church, I know that he was completely tone deaf. So I don't think I'm tone deaf, but it's not something that runs in the family, the musical skill. But I remember my first piano lesson with Sister Ruth Cecile, and I saw middle C on the blackboard, and she told me where to find it on the keyboard, and just to the left of the N of Steinway. And I'm useless on any other instrument, of course. But yeah, I said, well, this makes sense. And so I just, off to the races. And I never looked back. I mean, I always knew this was, from then, I knew this is what I wanted to do.
When was your first public performance?
Oh, we had a very large studio of Lily Simon's students in Evanston and Winnetka and everywhere in between. And so there was a once a year recital of all of her students, and it ran, from 3 p.m. until about 11 at night.
Like a very typical big piano studio recital, right?
Yeah, it was very big time. Lily's son was a fantastic pianist. Richard Geisert was another real star. Marianne Mortensen was another star, and I was in the top 5. So I was, we would get to show up late and play our Liszt Hungarian Rhapsodies, and that's how I got the bug of really playing some pretty high-end repertoire at a very early age.
Do you have a composer in particular, in regards to like piano classical composer, that you have a calling, or do you feel really closely associated to?
Yeah, it didn't happen until recently, but I've really come to the point where Bach is really the man for me. And that started out, I mean, I've always maintained that one cannot learn as much in any other music as one can learn from the Bach. And a couple of years ago, I think it was around the same time that Comey resigned, I was playing the Goldberg Variations at the Schubert Club in St. Paul. I did a couple of performances of the Goldberg Variations intermingled and prefaced by a couple of Philip Glass pieces. Actually, working Philip Glass with Matt was instructive because Philip very rarely puts in dynamic marks or phrase marks, and like Bach. And so you are encouraged to, maybe find a different path dynamically or phrase-wise or articulatively. So when I got done with the Goldbergs, I realized I wasn't playing on any more Bach, and it was immediately quite depressing, because I really needed that challenge at all times. And so that's the time that I decided to start working on the Well-Tempered Clavier. We've all done, a handful, but I thought this was the way to really approach it. And so I learned, both books. I recorded both books here at home on CD 207. And then concurrently, I created a lecture series called Everything We Need to Know About Playing the Piano We Learn from the Well-Tempered Clavier, which is 96 episodes, one on each of the preludes and fugues of both books. And it's about 40 plus hours of exploration and instruction. I had it for a time as a subscription on my website, and I'm just now gearing up to make a whole new YouTube channel of Christopher O'Reilly and create a a venue so that the series can be reshared, and of course, among other things, performances recorded here and elsewhere. So yeah, that's going to be coming up very shortly.
I did notice that looking at your YouTube channel that there has been a lot of Bach recently. So I could, this has been a wonderful project.
Yeah, it's been great.
Fantastic. Well, for our viewers, please go to Chris's YouTube channel and click on subscribe, and then click on the bell and click on all, so that way you can get his newest videos. It'll be wonderful.
Fantastic.
Tell me a little bit about Piazzolla, because when I performed with you last, we played some Piazzolla music, and I remember, I still remember your sensational cadenza that you had performed. And you have a relationship with Piazzolla's music and him. Yeah. So would you share to us a little bit about that?
Of course. I remember the first time I heard Piazzolla's music, it was on just a little portable cassette player that my friend clarinetist Chester Bresniak had brought back from his recent engagement at the time. This was probably in the 80s, early 80s, or maybe even late 70s. He was the clarinetist with the Sao Paulo Symphony. And so he brought back this music, and it just sounded passionate and angry and just completely engaged and so vital. And I'd never heard anything like it before. And so I became hooked at that time. And so got all the records, and I can honestly say that as far as piano recordings are concerned, I love Andras Schiff's first Goldbergs, and I love Sviatoslav Richter's Prokofiev Eighth Sonata, and Rachmaninoff's David's Wundertänze and Carnival. But right up there is Pablo Ziegler's performance of Verano Porteño, one of the more famous of the Four Seasons of Piazzolla. And Pablo Ziegler was Piazzolla's pianist in the New Tango Quintet for as long as I knew about the group. And many years after, I became enamored of Piazzolla's music, and I actually did my own arrangement of Verano Porteño as it happened. I got a phone call from Ettore Strata, who's somebody I'd worked with many years ago on the Andy Warhol-inspired Absolute Concerto concerts that I participated in at Andy's request. The Ettore produced that, and he had just produced a recording of Pablo Ziegler and Emanuel Ax, doing Pablo's two piano arrangements of Piazzolla tangos. And it was a record they did for Sony called Los Tangueros. It's a really good record. You could hear it. But then, of course, when Pablo was keen on touring this material, Manny was plenty busy doing the Manny things, the many Manny things that he does. And so they were without a second pianist for this idea of a tour. Ettore called me. I remember I was in a house in Santa Fe. It was summertime. He said, would you be interested in doing this? I said, are you kidding? I mean, this guy is just the most amazing pianist, the most amazing purveyor and advocate for tango music. And he, as much as I loved the music by itself, we Americans really have a very sort of jazz-oriented idea of how that music should go. He says, Chris, this is dance music. It must come from the ground. It must be firmly rooted. Because we think of the things, sort of in an upper chakra kind of, brainy sort of smart alecky kind of thing in terms of our syncopations and things. No, this is just like absolutely grounded. Anyway, so Pablo and I have been playing concerts together for about 20 years, over 20 years. And so we're in touch a lot, and we did our own record, Nuevo Tango, for Steinway, of not just Piazzolla tangos, but Pablo's own tangos, which are extraordinary in their own right. And just last week, Pablo has started publishing his two piano scores of Piazzolla tangos, his arrangements. He's been touring the world. There's some great YouTube stuff of the Four Seasons of Buenos Aires that he's arranged for piano and orchestra. There's a great Japanese performance on YouTube that I was just watching last night. And he wrote to me and sent me those performances because he has just completed and is now just publishing his own solo piano version of the Four Seasons of Buenos Aires. I mean, this is the most famous piece of Piazzolla's repertoire because people always like to pair it with the Vivaldi, and it makes a fantastic contradistinction and is a very, very big contrast, and they're both extremely kinetic and passionate works. So yeah, he said, he was wondering if I would want to make some videos and put them up as part of wanting to promote this publication. So that's what I've been doing constantly now, is I've been working them up, and I will then make a video recording, send it to Pablo, get some notes, and then we'll do the real thing. So that's coming up, gosh, in less than a week.
It's exciting. It's super exciting. And maybe it's the Radiohead tune that we just heard earlier that is making me think this way, the Subterranean Homesick Alien, and that color of that music going into tango seems like a very common denominator with the Christopher O'Reilly as a pianist. Like it's an attraction. It's a color attraction
yes, it is.
Harmony attraction that you have for sure. Listen, and then I love tango music. I love Piazzolla's music passionately. Yeah. So it's just a coincidence, that I noticed right now.
Yeah,
wonderful. So excited to see the projects, and definitely would follow, your social media to see what's up with that one.
I love following your Facebook feed for your travels and triumphs. It's amazing, Kay. It's just fantastic.
Thank you. So, Chris, you're an avid reader of Japanese authors, and I don't think I had an influence on that. But tell me who are some of your favorite authors are. And
actually, my Japanese literary obsession is only recent, in the last 2 years, because I read widely, mostly fiction, but I've read many authors absolutely comprehensively, lots of the big ones. And Murakami is, of course, an author that I've followed forever, and I've read everything of his, and I love him. He's, of course, a great writer in his simpatico with music of all kinds. His latest, Killing Commendatore, has some nice, Schubert passage work in it. But a couple of years ago, a friend turned me on to a book called I Am a Cat by Natsume Soseki. And this became my favorite book, of course, because I love cats,
Yes.
But this was told from the standpoint of a cat who was in the household and wandering around the neighborhood of this very old professor, and his students would come by, and all these funny characters would come by. And so basically, after a while, he's sort of the cat sitting in the corner, and we're hearing all this interchange between all these very, very colorful characters and very sort of very entertaining episodes. It's a huge book, but it's the most entertaining. And so, of course, from there I read all of Soseki, and my friend also turned me on to Yasunari Kawabata. I went through everything of his, and I'm now just at the end. I've had an amazing immersion into the work of Yukio Mishima. I actually started reading him probably maybe less than a year ago, but I started with Spring Snow, which was the first of his tetralogy, The Sea of Fertility, which was the last work that he completed. And so I started with Spring Snow, and then I decided to go back and start from the beginning, and it was somewhat to the whim of Amazon, which, whichever book I got next was what I read next, basically. But I adore his writing, and I adore his point of view, and of course his great triumph and tragedy. I'm tempted to say, because he committed seppuku, and it was obvious in the midst of this very nationalist, loyalist to the emperor movement that actually forms part of the narrative of the second book of the tetralogy that I just finished, Runaway Horses. It also comes up in Mishima's treatise, Sun and Sword, and that's Sun and Steel or
Sun and Steel.
Yeah. And that really brings up his own very disciplinarian and glorified sense of purity. And even better reason to pick up Sun and Steel is that there are so many English translators, and I don't speak Japanese. I can't tell which one is better. I just know which ones I enjoy the most. And there was a fellow named John Bester who did Sun and Steel, and he also translated a book of Mishima's stories called Acts of Worship. So those are it's kind of funny. I guess I might recommend Acts of Worship for someone who's never read Mishima for the fiction. And actually, Sun and Steel is an extraordinary testament, and to really get a sense of him and how he looks at the world and how he idealizes things. It's an extraordinary little book.
How would you say that the story telling from Japanese writers are different from the Western storytelling?
I think actually there's the one through line that I'm finding in all of my favorite Japanese writers. I think Murakami is a little bit more character driven. I think Mishima is just as character driven, but I am always remarking on the constant attention to the setting and the extraordinarily in-depth descriptions of the clothing, of the sky, of the clouds, of the sound of the ocean. Absolutely everything is an emotional and sensual wash, but at the same time, it always paints the most perfect and pristine picture in every moment of his books. And Kawabata also had that power, and Soseki did as well. But I think it's that sense of environment, that sense of mise en scène that really I'm most affected by in the Japanese literature.
I feel like maybe as a side COVID-19 project, if you recited the book, pages of the book while you played some music, that adds color to the text.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
That might be the new Christopher O'Reilly project.
We can do that, yes.
I don't need commission on it, but just credit me somewhere.
Thanks, Dave. You're in.
Well, final question of the evening is, performing music has become such a routine activity for all of us for so many years. This is what defines us as artists and as performers. Then all of a sudden, because of this world crisis, performing in public has become extremely difficult. How has your attitude towards music and performing for an audience changed?
Well, I myself have been in quarantine for a lot longer than anyone else. Pleasantly, I might say, because once I started getting into the whole Bach project, I really was just hunkered down here and just making recordings and making lectures. The reason I'm able to do that is because I have the best piano on earth. This is CD 207 that I got from the New York basement a few years ago. Its last gig before coming to retire with me was being on tour with Billy Joel. It was apparently Alicia De La Rocha's favorite piano in New York. It lived for many years at the 92nd Street Y. I'm sure I've actually played on this piano before. But so I have the most wonderful piano, and I also have the most wonderful piano microphone. It's called the AMT, Advanced Microphone Technologies, AMT M40, and it's a little gold plate with a capsule mic attached, and that attaches to the inside of the frame of the piano, and you can, of course, place it anywhere you like. I've got it sort of around the bend, and then, of course, the fun part is you have to close the piano. The mic is really taking a very concentrated signal from the instrument itself. No ambient noise, no nothing. I mean, you can mess with that as you wish. I tend to like the clarity of the sound and the warmth of the sound. And so even better, I can make recordings and no one will hear me sing and no one will hear the UPS guy arriving, things like that. So I'm happy to say that the technology has really enabled me to keep busy. And if I want to perform for folks, I'll perform for folks and set it up and send it out. It's become all the more important with the Bach series in that, this is a perfect time for this series because it's an enormous wealth of information that can be, I think, transformative. I really do think I have a method out of this Bach program that can be very well used as the title imagines it can. It can be used in every music one can imagine. I'm using it now working on Pablo's arrangements of the Piazzolla in terms of foreground and background and making sure that the accent of one hand does not impel the right hand to do an accent if it doesn't, if it isn't marked. We tend to, as pianists, play both hands at the same time. And I think it really needs to be a matter of play with both hands. My teacher, Russell Sherman, just said that play is an instructive word because we want to have this feeling of joy. With, and that's the interplay, and both, so both hands have to be really have to be in on the deal. So that's helped enormously. So I think the technology and having my favorite instrument at my beck and call really makes life quite nice.
Yeah, it seems like you've well equipped. You're in a great situation. You didn't have to go outside anyways.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, well, fantastic. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, it's been such a pleasure being with you and speaking with you and just being with you again. Yeah.
And then thank you for the audience members that watched today. And please share and like, and then send it to any piano friends and Radiohead fans, so that they can check out Chris's amazing arrangements of Radiohead and everything else. So, actually, you know what? Before I go, I wanted to share some comment from Esther.
Yes.
Christina did the China tour with you.
Yes. Right. Interesting. I'm the one being interviewed on the opposite sides. That's so funny, Esther. That's great.
Yes. And thank you, Victoria, for your message. Fantastic. Well, everyone, have a good evening, and then stay tuned for the next one. Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for watching. Please remember to subscribe, like, and share this video. ありがとうございました。チャンネル登録、いいね、そしてこのビデオをぜひシェアしてください。